job on making it this far into the course. Next, we're going to look at arrays. Arrays give us the ability to hold multiple values within a single variable. So just as we saw before, where we create a variable, you can give it a name. So I'm going to call it my array, or how about we call it my array 1, in case we want to create a few different arrays. Now, arrays have some built-in functionality as well, which we're going to be taking a look at. So the first thing that we're going to do is create an array. So an array is indicated with the square brackets. And arrays are different than what we saw within the objects, where the objects had a property and then a value associated with it. Arrays are a little bit different because arrays are a list of items. So essentially, starting at 0, so the first index item value is 0. Let's add in some values. So we'll create a string there, and we'll create a second item there. We'll create a third item there. We'll create a fourth item there. And notice that the data types, they always take that same format. So you can see that these are strings, this is a number, this is Boolean. So let's refresh, and let's take a look at what's contained within my array. And you see that we've got all of those values, but instead of the way that the object had it, where it had the property and then the value, we've just got a number. And this is an index value. Another interesting thing here is that we've got a length. So we can actually retrieve back the my array, and we can get any array's length, and we can see how many items are sitting in that array. And that's actually really super useful. And we're going to be making use of that later on as we go through the course. So next, let's look at how we can retrieve back those values. So we know that within the objects we could specify, and we also saw these square brackets within the object as well. And we could specify it. So this one would have had first, that would have been last, that would have been age, and so on. But we don't have those same values in order to retrieve them. All we have is a number that they fall into this list. So this is the first one, but arrays start at 0. So in order to retrieve that, we have to indicate that my array 1, 0, and then the next one is 1, then the next one is 2, and going all the way to 3. So in order to get the last value, it's going to be 3. It's not 4. And that's sometimes kind of confusing with arrays because they do start the index at an earlier value. There's also ways to add in values within the arrays as well. So just as we saw earlier with the objects, where we can take the object name and then grab the index value. So if we want to take 2, and if we want to put in a different age, let's see what happens. Let's refresh. And now let's see what the value for my array 1 and index 2, which is the third item. I know, a little bit weird and confusing, but you'll get used to it. So that's 40. So we can do the same thing where we can update any one of those values, and all we have to do is reference the index value. So if we want to turn Lawrence into Lisa, now if we list out the array, we see that the array has actually changed. So it gives us the ability to change the values within the array, work with them dynamically, and so on. So we can also, so you're probably wondering, okay, well, what if I take the my array and I don't know what the next index value is, and let's say I guess that it's 50, and I'm equaling it to test. So what do you think has happened here within the array? So when we call back the array, the weird thing happens that we've got actually 51 items within the array. There's only 5 that actually have values, but the length of the array is how many items we have. So we effectively actually created 46 empty items, and that's what's going on here. So this is something to keep in mind when you're setting the value by the index number. So you don't get an undefined. You can declare, it's already been declared, and you can set any index value you want. And if you're unsure about what the value is and you make up some number, then it's going to actually automatically adjust the array. So the important key here is that there's no missing values, no missing numbers in the index. There's going to be all the way from 0 to 50 even though it's not being output here and even though they're sitting as empty. So keep that in mind when you are working with arrays, that you can make use of the different arrays within this type of format. So if you wanted to add another item to the end of the array, and actually I'm going to do this within the code, I can take my array 1, and we need to know what that last index value is going to be. And if we don't know what it is, we definitely need to have a number in there or we're going to throw an error. So how do you think that we figure that out? And if you were paying attention earlier, we did say that we can get the length of it. So what happens now is when I refresh, so that worked, and we see that we get the length of it as last. So basically, every time I take the statement and I do last, because the array length is changing, so if I do it a bunch of times, and now I list out the my array, we've got 10 items in there, and that's because we've added in last. So every time there, so this is an actual number value that's being returned for it, which is 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever it is at that current instant. And at that point, we're taking that index value and then we're applying a value of last to it. So that's what's happening there. And you can also be a little bit more dynamic on this as well. So now if I list out the my array, you see that it's 4 if I repeat this value. And if I do it a number of times, we see that they always increment. So that's one way to do that. And coming up next, I'm going to show you some array methods where we're going to dive into the array, and I'll show you some really cool things you can do with it. So that's coming up next. And there is a better way to add content to your arrays, as well as remove it.